What should have been a romantic trip to Iceland has gone awry when an unexpected twist derails a young couple's plans. Sadly, this leaves them stranded with no one else around. A vehicle drives along the scenic roads of Iceland with an American couple on board. Riley wakes to the sight of beautiful landscapes, and as he takes his film camera to shoot photos, his girlfriend Jenai stares at him lovingly. After settling into their hotel room, they go on a tour around Iceland. Their trip takes them through geysers and hot springs they bathe in. All the while, Riley keeps taking pictures of everything. While they're in the hot springs, Jenai tells Riley she wants to help out since he spent all his savings on the trip. At that moment, they endearingly smear mud on each other's faces. Over a meal, Jenai wonders if they'll be able to find film, but Riley assures her that he brought enough. Declining Jenai's offer to buy him a new camera, Riley says he doesn't want a computer autocorrecting everything and prefers capturing the moment, a trait inspired by his dad. With this philosophy of photography, even capturing imperfections is okay. Continuing their trip, they arrive at a historic church and tour historic parliamentary meeting places. Riley snaps photos of Jenai as she poses by the rocks while everyone else listens to the tour guide. They share mischievous but tender moments together. In the glow of the church's stained glass, Jenai recounts how she doesn't miss churches thanks to her dad's plain and office-like place where she grew up in. But in Iceland, she revels in the church's beauty. Afterward, they walk to some beautiful waterfalls. Behind the falls, they share tender kisses amid the mist. Later that night, after a tiring but eventful day throughout Iceland, they settle in. But at 3:24 a.m., Jenai awakens from her sleep. She peeks through the blinds, opening them to watch the auroras dancing in the sky. Suddenly, a bright light showers the heavens, but it disappears just as she marvels at it. The next morning, Riley steps out of the shower to find Jenai still asleep. He entices her to explore more sceneries and cuisine, and despite her initial protests, he convinces her. When they arrive downstairs, Riley is confused that the hotel has served no breakfast yet, so he asks Jenai to have breakfast at a cafe, noticing an empty reception desk. As they step outside, they find everything eerily quiet, and only the two of them appear to be awake. After confirming the time, Riley gets increasingly confused upon seeing the empty streets. They exchange plausible explanations for the emptiness as they continue walking, but still, there are no signs of anyone else. Panic begins settling in when they see that even the convenience store is empty. Pacing wildly across the city, they find no one. It appears everyone has disappeared without a trace. Finally, they rest in a restaurant, tired and confused. They look around the establishment, searching for answers. While Riley's checking television shows, Jenai leaves a voicemail to her mom, wanting to talk to her because of the weird day. Surprisingly, Riley discovers that news channels are down. Heading back outside, they admit they're starting to freak out while looking for a possible reason. They discover that social media is also silent. Returning to the hotel, Riley opens his laptop and sees the internet is still working, reading a news report. Jenai, who's just finished leaving a voicemail to her friend, notes that the content hasn't been updated since yesterday. Riley tries rationalizing and decides to check security cameras across the world, but to their shock, the streets are empty wherever they look. Panicking, Riley is in denial and claims there's got to be someone else out there. Heading out, they once again look for people in the city but find no one. Riley then begins getting agitated. While outside, they find a car with an open window that's still in drive. They use it to scour the city, and still finding no one, all the way out to the countryside. Jenai tries looking for meaning, wondering if it's already the rapture or apocalypse. Upon Riley's prodding, she tries contacting her mother again but to no avail. Lost in empty neighborhoods under the afternoon sun, they find comfort in each other's arms. Tired after a long day and frustrated that she can't contact anyone, Jenai leans against Riley while they sit in a restaurant. Riley wants to believe in a reason, but he too admits he doesn't know what's happening. Despite that, at least they're together. At past 10 that night, they return to their hotel. Jenai asks Riley to close the blinds, but he just sits there wondering. Jenai repeats her request and says she wants to sleep because she's tired of the midnight sun. The next morning, Riley wakes Jenai, but she doesn't want to, so Riley leaves her alone. When he returns, Jenai asks how they'll get home, but Riley doesn't know yet. Jenai wonders about divine intervention, but Riley dismisses the thought and focuses on what they're going to do about it. Sadly, Jenai feels homesick. Riley leaves, scouring the kitchen to brew coffee. He brings Jenai breakfast and a gingerbread latte, brewed to the best of his ability, and Jenai thanks him for the effort despite the drink having too much gingerbread. Appreciating the gesture, she lies close to his chest. The entire town is still empty. To survive, they decide to loot the nearby grocery. While Jenai has a few items items in hand, Riley walks past her carrying carts of groceries. He asks her to wait, so Jenai checks her phone in the meantime. Riley returns with another car, and as they go back to the hotel in separate vehicles, Riley finally gets their bags. Saying it's time to upgrade, Riley leads Jenai to one of the abandoned houses, claiming it as theirs. As he dives onto the couch, Jenai inspects the place, asking if it's all that simple. Afterward, at a clothing store, Jenai stuns Riley with the fit of her clothing, and he throws her more clothes to try on. Despite the lonely confusion around them, they have fun trying different clothing. Before leaving, they also sneak out some cutlery and alcohol to drink. Then, they entertain themselves with Monopoly and playful banter. The next morning, Jenai asks over breakfast if Riley thinks they're being tested. Riley asks if she believes in God and if everything happens according to his plan, but Jenai says belief and faith are different. Riley comforts her, telling her the world is currently their oyster. To take their mind off things, they go to the countryside. Jenai carries a bouquet, and when Riley arrives in a car, takes his hand. During the drive, she lets both her shoes fall out the window. Arriving by the geothermal pools, Riley lays a cloth on the grass, and they lie together. Jenai snaps a photo of them together and kisses Riley. When Riley decides to nap, Jenai stands and starts removing her clothes before walking to the pool. Riley, enchanted and enamored, follows while taking photos of her from behind. Jenai takes off her clothes completely, gets into the pool, and Riley follows suit. There, they kiss passionately. When Jenai awakens later, she decides to walk through lavender fields. Riley wakes up after her too, and he continues taking photos of her. Then, he calls Jenai and takes a photo of her standing among the flowers. After that, they return to the city. In the grocery store, Riley acts like a child and wounds himself while riding the cart. Then, for a romantic date, Jenai dolls herself up but stares pensively at her reflection. Riley, all suited, pours Jenai some wine over a candlelight dinner. He attempts to toast, but Jenai says they need to talk. She brings up his injury at the grocery store that he just laughed off. Jenai wants Riley to be more careful because they have no one to rely on but themselves, but Riley just remains callous and indifferent about her concerns. Hurt and agitated, Jenai storms off. In the aftermath, Riley walks through the deserted city with a bouquet in hand. When he arrives home, he finds Jenai lying down, and she begins recounting her regular routine at around that hour. Realizing why she's upset, Riley promises he'll be more careful. Jenai gets up and talks about her treasured book, regretting that she didn't bring it. Though Riley suggests finding a copy around, she only wants her copy as it was given by her father. It served as her record of the important and meaningful things that happened to her, such as the first time she admitted she loved Riley. Then, Riley smiles at the memory. In response, Riley tells her they have everything they'll ever need, beautiful scenery and each other. He also adds that they can always build everything else. Jenai stares at Riley and he says they have the entire world, but she just wants to go home. Again, while outside in an empty city, Riley keeps taking photos. After their excursion, they return home, and Jenai finds the tap isn't running. Riley eats blueberry yogurt, but Jenai says he should eat the strawberry one since it'll expire first. Because of Riley's stubbornness, Jenai slams the bag and reminds him they'll eat them in order because they won't have lasting food stocks. Riley retorts they can plant and hunt, but Jenai mocks his idea. Riley wonders if Jenai thinks he's capable, but she just wants him to eat the food in order. Later, Riley swims alone in the pool while Jenai walks to a church. Approaching a statue, she asks it questions about everyone's disappearance, looking for a reason. On one of their trips outside the city, they arrive at some hot springs. Riley asks Jenai to listen to the heartbeat of the world, admitting he loves Iceland. When they reach a beach with volcanic rocks, he retells a legend about trolls, but Jenai just reminds him they're out of drinking water. Continuing the trip, they drive to an abandoned plane fuselage. Riley takes a photo and tells Jenai its history, but when he asks if it's beautiful, Jenai replies they aren't looking at the same thing. While Riley might see it as something beautiful, to Jenai, it's just dead garbage that outlived its usefulness. Riley says he thought Jenai would like it, but she yells that he can't just change the scenery to cheer her up. Exasperated, Riley asks what he should do then, but Jenai just tells him to open his eyes and drives away. That night, Jenai sleeps in the car in the middle of nowhere while Riley rests inside the abandoned plane. By morning, Jenai returns and stares at her sleeping boyfriend. When Riley wakes up, he spots Jenai looking out at the horizon. Though saying nothing, he meets her, and she hands him something to drink. Then, they drive home. Back in the city, Riley walks around and takes photos of graffiti and public art. An artwork with haunting eyes spooks him, causing him to toss his film aside. Meanwhile, Jenai passes the time by scrolling through her laptop, looking for notifications and trying to contact people. Riley heads to the grocery store alone, collecting several pipes. Jenai then decides to go to the church and pray, while Riley gets startled as the elevator he entered almost locks him inside. He panics, but fortunately, the doors reopen. When he returns home, Riley can't find Jenai, so instead, he gets busy constructing contraptions, eventually making a wheel of pots. Unknown to him, Jenai is in a field feeding a horse and enjoying the company of other other horses moving past her. At some other time, the two are again traveling the countryside with Jenai driving while listening to voicemail. They drive past some glaciers until they eventually get out of the car and explore around. When Riley takes a photo, Jenai comments he hasn't even found a place to develop them. Sitting together, Jenai comes close and laughs about them sitting on a glacier. Still trying to understand what's happening, Jenai talks about the force of nature that wipes the earth clean and adds that maybe God got impatient. While Riley says the future is uncertain, he won't give up on their relationship. Seconds later, the sound of waterfalls catches Jenai's attention. When they return, Jenai finds a place to develop film. Then, during her walk with Riley, she sees an establishment with flowers that have already wilted and died. Seeing Jenai's sadness, Riley invites her to look for flowers somewhere else. They drive away, and Riley says they need a change of scenery. Though their lives will be simpler, he jokes that Jenai won't have any gingerbread lattes anymore. Eventually, they arrive at a lakeside cabin, which Riley finds beautiful. Inside the cabin is a fireplace, and Riley decides to gather some wood. Suddenly, outside, Riley sees an old man named Niels. Riley runs to him as he stumbles and drops the firewood he's carrying. When Niels regains his composure, he asks for food and water, and Riley helps him back to the cabin. After giving Niels some food, Riley laughs in relief, thinking they're all alone. He also confirms to Niels that they found no one else aside from him. Niels tells them he left the city when everyone disappeared but returned to the cabin upon thinking the world would end. Then, he coughs deeply. Riley encourages him to stay alive and survive with them, but his hope fades when Niels coughs again. After giving him some water, Jenai holds his hand and tells him they're grateful they found him because it's good not to be alone. Despite Riley's optimism, Niels appears to have accepted his fate, irritating Riley. That night, while Riley's sleeping, Jenai sits in front of the fireplace. Niels asks why they're in Iceland, and she tells him they're on vacation but that she misses her family. Niels tells her of the Welsh word "hirith," grief for a home one can never return to. While scribbling on his stone, Niels tells Jenai about how his family became strangers because he spent his life on the seas to make a living. Jenai finds the situation unfair, but Niels reminds her that the world isn't fair. She then wonders if they're on their own, and Niels gives her another definition of hirith, grief for a home that never was. Hearing this, Jenai finds that nothing matters, saying God has forsaken them, but Niels advises her that everything is essentially meaningless. The next morning, Riley gently wakes Jenai with a kiss, and he slowly breaks the news to her that Niels has died. She gets up, surprised, and walks to Niels' room while Riley tells her of a nearby cemetery where they can bury him. While Riley is digging a hole, Jenai doesn't see the point in burying Niels. This confuses Riley, who reminds her that it's what humans do, but Jenai is focused on finding other survivors, convinced there are others out there. When Riley reminds her they've searched for weeks, Jenai asks him if they've really been looking. Returning to the city, Jenai grabs some duct tape and begins plotting a map. Then, she marks abandoned houses with tape and bangs on doors. Riley asks her to stop and look, pointing out that she's marking the dead, not finding the living. Riley just wants her to come home with him, but Jenai says there's no home there. Riley notices Jenai's looking for answers where there aren't any, and she snaps at him. Jenai says she's looking for answers to that insane situation which Riley thinks is just some celestial mistake. Riley clarifies he doesn't think it's a mistake, just that it doesn't matter because it won't change who Jenai is. Jenai mutters that nothing makes sense, and Riley agrees, but they differ in what that means. Riley tries convincing her they can still live a good life, but Jenai admits she doesn't know what that is anymore. Later back home, Riley is busy making a windmill. Then, he leads Jenai to a river and asks her to remember the glacier they once sat on. The water that melts from that glacier is what creates that river. His point is to remind Jenai that life is always trying. As Riley's about to cry, Jenai pulls his face close to hers, kisses him, and hugs him. Over dinner, Jenai brings Riley the last of their water. Touching Riley's arm, Jenai thanks him for that day, and he says they'll be okay. Then, Jenai smiles a little at this. While washing the dishes, Jenai's laptop receives an email. Looking close, she stares intently. Then, she anxiously opens the email, only to find it's a photo that Riley sent. She cries in disappointment and frustration, realizing that no one else is really out there. The next morning, Riley finds a huge white envelope with his name written on it. He activates the water pump before checking the envelope's contents. Inside, he finds beautifully developed grayscale photos. However, he grows concerned upon seeing all the pictures of Jenai. Riley drives hurriedly around the city, reaching the beach and church before eventually finding Jenai's car parked near the geothermal pool. Back at home, Riley's contraption for Jenai activates, and water flows from the tap. Frantic, Riley runs to the geothermal pool, where he finds Jenai's lifeless body floating. He jumps into the pool and carries Jenai to the edge, but she's already dead. Then, Riley sits, resigned. Finding it all pointless, he too tries drowning himself, but he suddenly re-emerges, not wanting to die that easily. He stumbles on the dirt, crying and groaning as he lifts Jenai. Unfortunately, his knees buckle, and he collapses onto the grass. Riley hugs Jenai's body close, and then he stands, leaving her alone in that place. Though he stumbles again, he keeps walking away. Riley returns to his car, weakened and beaten. Then, he starts driving, looking emptily at the road as he slowly comes to terms with reality. In the end, he grips his steering wheel and just continues driving, determined to survive.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.